If the Wisconsin 14 keep playing hide and seek instead of getting back to work, it's going to cost them. Today, Republicans in the state Senate voted to approve a resolution that fines the missing Democrats $100 for each session day that they miss. The lawmakers are avoiding voting on a bill that would take power away from public worker unions. And you know what power means to unions. They say they are for the workers, but it really all boils down to power, doesn't it? And I'm not just saying that. Even union leaders have admitted to it. Listen to what former general counsel of the NEA, the National Education Association, which is the largest union in the United States, once said about putting power before children.
Despite what some among us would like to believe, it is not because we care about children, and it is not because we have a vision of a great public school for every child. NEA and its affiliates are effective advocates because we have power. And we have power because there are more than 3.2 million people who are willing to pay us hundreds of millions of dollars in dues each year.
Unbelievable. That is the lawyer for the largest union in the United States. You can't make this stuff up. If you put that in a script, in a movie, no one would find it believable. Joining us now with more facts about unions you might not know about is Tim Phillips, president of Americans for Prosperity. Tim, it's a pleasure. Welcome back to the Glenn Beck program. I mean, this guy that we just listened to is really unbelievable. It's about the millions of dollars in dues, and it's about our power. It's not about what we do for the kids. Question, is that typical of labor union leadership of public sector unions in the United States of America today, Tim?
Judge, too often these union bosses do put their own health care pensions and benefits and salaries above the public good. And they want to tell us that they're sacrificing to work in the public sector, but their salaries, pensions, and benefits are far beyond what taxpayers in the private sector receive. You bet it is.
Tell me how the following phenomenon occurs, and the governor of my own home state of New Jersey, Chris Christie, has been at the forefront of this. He has basically said to the teachers union, the workers, the teachers, I have nothing against you folks. It's the leadership of your union that has taken these dues from you and used it for political means and given themselves these fantastic salaries and these wonderful benefits. So question, how do hardworking, blue-collar, salt-of-the-earth people elect these crazies to lead their unions like the guy we just listened to?
Too often these union bosses achieve power through the backroom games and deals. It's not the most democratic process sometimes in these government unions. And I think that taxpayers need to support folks like Governor Christie and Governor Walker in Wisconsin, who are putting the taxpayers first. And they're saying, look, these pensions and benefits for the union bosses that they've negotiated are out of control, and we've got to rein them in. It's unsustainable fiscally, and it's unfair for them to receive more than the taxpayers who are funding them.
What are some of the myths about unions that are sort of out there that most people generally accept because they haven't had the opportunity to look beneath the myth?
One is that collective bargaining is some kind of sacred right for public employees. In fact, federal employees do not have collective bargaining, and no less than Franklin Delano Roosevelt said we should never have collective bargaining for public employees because it leads to inefficiencies and waste and puts too much power into the hands of the unions. And FDR was certainly no union buster, Judge. I think that's a big myth. The second big myth is that, again, they take a financial sacrifice to work for the public good. And that's just not true. Their salaries, pensions, benefits are far beyond what folks in the private sector receive. A federal worker, the average federal worker, receives $123,000 a year before you add in pensions and benefits. That's hardly sacrifice.
Got to be well above the national average for whatever the comparable job would be in the private sector. How did this happen? I mean, are some Republicans at fault for this as well because they sort of gave into the temptation of giving the unions good, juicy, big, fat contracts in return for votes in the hopes that the type of thing we see in Wisconsin and the type of conversation you and I are having now would never come to the public's attention?
That's exactly right. Both parties have been susceptible to this union pressure. And think about it. You're in Wisconsin. The union boss sitting across the table from you as an elected official represents 150,000 people across the state.
Right.
They're all paying forced dues. They have a big payroll to pump into the elections. Most of these politicians cave in a heartbeat, and that's wrong. That's why I really applaud these governors like Walker and Christie who are standing up for taxpayers and saying, look, it's time to rein this in. But it's collective bargaining that's doing it.
Got it. Tim Phillips, it's a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
You bet.
Lawmakers are now pushing to overturn the Federal Communications decision to regulate the Internet. An update on the fight for freedom of speech from Capitol Hill. Next. Lawmakers squared off today in a congressional hearing pushing to overturn the FCC's recent decision to regulate the Internet. Did you know that? The federal government wants to regulate the Internet. How successful were they in the fight over net neutrality? Joining me now, Congresswoman Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee, who was at the hearing and who fights for freedom of speech when it comes to these things. Congresswoman Blackburn, welcome here. What happened today? Did the Congress make any progress in stopping the bureaucrats at the FCC from regulating the Internet?
Yes, we did, Judge. We were able to pass our resolution of disapproval out of our subcommittee today. It was a 15-8 vote, right down party lines. It's exactly what we had expected. We'll go to the full committee with this and then on to the floor with it, and certainly anticipate that we will get it out of the House in short order. All
right. The government, the FCC, the bureaucrats call this net neutrality. Just one of their fancy words to try and make this sound attractive. What it really is to allow the ugly nose of the government to get under the tent and to start regulating what we can watch and what we can log on to and what we can even say on the Internet. Right. How could they possibly think they can get away with that in the face of Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech?
Well, and that's why we had our 8-line resolution of disapproval that we're going to pass on them and bring this to a halt. This is basically what happened. Christmas week, they go in and for the first time ever, they enact their governance on the Internet. They do this without Congress's approval. They do not have this authority. We have never had federal regulation of the Internet. That's why the Internet is an engine of economic development in this nation. Now, what they want to do is to put priority and value to all the content on the broadband pipe. It's basically the fairness doctrine.
Can you assure us and everybody watching now that nobody will regulate the Internet, that the Congress won't regulate the Internet, that the president can't shut it down, that it will forever be free?
Well, historically it has been. In '96, when we did the Telecom Act, that was the approach that was taken, hands off. Same thing was repeated in '05 with the '06 Act. That is the intent of Congress. We've got a 3-step process: defunding, passing the Congressional Review Act, which is the resolution of disapproval, and then passing my legislation, which will be the Internet Freedom Act.
15 seconds left. I'm holding up 2 light bulbs, a good old-fashioned Thomas Edison one and one of these horrible ones that doesn't work. You're leading the forefront to stop the government from forcing us to use these in our homes. Are we going to win? Will we have freedom of light in our homes?
You're going to have freedom of light in your homes, and we're picking up co-sponsors every single day.
Got it.
Thanks for the good work helping us.
Thank you, Congresswoman Blackburn. My final thoughts on freedom, Gitmo, and the Constitution. Next. Work for us, or do we work for the government? Are the rights that we have from birth, free speech, privacy, travel, fairness from the government, truly ours, or can they be taken away by a piece of paper signed by the president? Tonight, freedom, Gitmo, and you. As many of you know, in addition to filling in for Glenn Beck this week on the Fox News Channel and my other Fox assignments, I also host my own show called Freedom Watch on the Fox Business Network at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. If you watch both of these shows, and if you've heard me talk about freedom before, then none of what I'm about to say should come as a surprise to you. On the Glenn Beck Show and on Freedom Watch, my closing statements this week have addressed the recent decision by President Obama to issue an executive order declaring that he can keep people in jail even after a jury has found them not guilty, and he can lock up whomever he wants and not even file charges against them. The emails and tweets and Facebook comments to my statements on this have been overwhelming. Most of you agree that the president is wrong, terribly wrong. But many of you were surprised to learn that a president can do this. If history has taught us anything, it is that presidents can do whatever they can get away with, and President Obama is no exception. Lincoln arrested newspaper editors who challenged his politics. Wilson arrested people for speaking German in public. FDR arrested Japanese Americans just because of their ancestry. President Obama is not only no exception, rather he is an example that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Now, when I say corrupts, I don't mean corruption in the tabloid sense of receiving something of value in return for the exercise of governmental power. That's not the case here. Rather, the case here is different, but equally as serious. You see, when Barack Obama was a senator, he argued against military trials for folks who are not accused of violating the rules of war. He argued against America operating a penal colony off our shores where no federal judges could assure fairness. And he argued against the incarceration of people who had not been charged with a crime, or people who juries, whether military or civilians, had already acquitted. And when he became president, he promised to uphold the Constitution and the values that underlie it. But now that he has the power of the presidency, he has rejected what he once believed, and he has refused his oath to uphold the Constitution. George W. Bush did the same, and I did not hesitate to address those wrongs when he did them. But here you have a president who was a star student at Harvard Law School, one of the best law schools in the country, who taught constitutional law at the University of Chicago Law School, also one of the best in the country, and who held himself out as an expert on the Constitution. But now that he has the ability to affect human liberty and to enhance his standing with certain political groups here at home, he has claimed for himself powers nowhere even hinted at in the Constitution and utterly rejected by the Supreme Court. A school child could tell you that when a jury finds you not guilty, the government lets you go. A first-year law student knows that if the government doesn't have enough evidence to charge you, the government must let you go. All lawyers know that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and the president must uphold it whether it is convenient for him or not. But this president has rejected those truths. How about this, Mr. President? All men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Does that sound familiar, Mr. President? The rights are inalienable, as you cannot take them away. Will you reject the words upon which this nation was founded? The framers gave us a president, not a king. If the president can decide what laws to enforce and what laws to reject, if he can decide that the government will respect the rights of some and reject the rights of others, if he can claim powers from some unnamed source other than the Constitution, then he is a king and not a president. And you all know what happened the last time we had a king. More of this on Freedom Watch tonight. From New York, defending freedom. So long, America.